this video, we will have a look how we can create unlimited obstacles and ground. Okay, we will spawn multiple grounds. So if you haven't watched the spawner ground video, I will have a link in the description. You can go ahead and check that out, and we can spawn unlimited ground. Instead, I use in this video a character. You can replace this character with this cube, okay, easily. So without furthering delay, let's get into this topic. So let's go to prefab folder. Okay, prefab folder. So I'm gonna duplicate this prefab. Okay, to duplicate, let's select the prefab and Control D to duplicate it. Let's call this one. So I'm gonna double click that to open up that prefab. Okay, so let's name it this one to ground 2. Okay, let's name it to ground 2. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna change something in this ground 2. Okay, so let's go to scene view. So click on that arrow. So I'm gonna drag this ground 2 right over here. Okay, and what I want, I want to have some enemies to this ground. To do so, I'm gonna go to assets. I have right over here. I will have a link in the description of that website, that maximo.com. I will have a link. I will leave a link in the description. You can go and check that out. Okay, so I'm gonna drag any character, so something like this one. Okay, this one, sorry, this one, and let's delete. I'm not gonna drag this one, so let's drag this one instead. So as you can see, it's totally white. So what we need to extract textures. Okay, so I'm gonna select that character, basically this one what I just recently dragged. So select that one, go over to inspector, then model. Okay, so not model materials. Okay, and you can see texture and click on extract texture. Okay, extract texture, and you have to select a folder where you want to extract all of the texture. Okay, so I'm gonna go to assets, right click and new folder. I'm gonna create a folder for our textures, so let's call it textures. Okay, textures, and let's double click that to open up that folder, and let's select that folder. Okay, it will extract all of the texture right there. And it's a normal map setting, and it says a material is using the texture as a normal map. So click on fix now. Okay, fix now and cut that, and now it's gone. Okay, now we are able to see our character. Okay, so what I want, it's pretty small. If you just place this character our next to player, it will be too much small. Okay, so if I drag this character right next to our player game object. Okay, so you're gonna able to see that character will be so much small, as you can see. Okay, as you can see, it's pretty small. So I'm gonna make it a little bit larger. To do so, let's duplicate, sorry, let's scale in the x2, in the y2, in the z something like 2. Okay, so now it's fine. Oh, now it's fine. So I'm gonna rotate this character to face our character, to face in the direction player game object is facing. Okay, I will flip this character. So let's select this character and let's play around with y-axis. As you can see, it's indeed rotating. So I'm gonna set minus 180. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now, and let's add up a collider to this game object for collision detection. So let's hit this add component and find over there box collider. Okay, box collider, and you can adjust the collider. So I'm gonna edit the collider. So let's edit this. Okay, so this will be our character. I will have a link in the description of that website. You can go and check that out. So this our character. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna place this character to ground to ground to, you can say ground to ground. Okay, so I'm gonna select this character select this character and I'm gonna place it top of this ground too, and let's select this character. I'm gonna place it to this ground too. Okay, and ground to somewhere here. Okay, somewhere here. So I want to add another component which is rigid body for adding gravity. So I'm gonna select this character, click on add component and find their rigid body. Okay, and you can play around with mass. And so I'm gonna go to ground to game object, basically the main game object where we place it. Let's go to overrides and click on apply all, so it will change in the prefab as well. So I'm gonna select this character. Let's drag it little bit further away, something like right over here. So what I want, let's delete this ground to game object from the scene view now. So what I want, I also want to spawn that ground to game object as well as the besides this ground one game object. Okay, so let's open up the script which is our ground spawner script by double clicking on it. Okay, so as you can see we spawning. Okay, basically we calling this spawn function, and in spawn function indeed it's spawning this ground prefab at this point with no rotation. Okay, so as we know that if we move over to, okay, if we move over to prefab folder, we have more than one ground. As you can see we have two ground, so we also need to spawn both of these. Okay, not only specific one, we need to spawn both of these. So what we need to make an array which can hold up multiple names. It can be names, game objects, position, anything like that. It can hold up multiple data. In variable we can store single piece of data, but in array we can hold up multiple datas. Okay, so what we have to do, let's go to ground spawner script. Instead, as you can see, ground prefab. Okay, ground prefab, basically that's ground referencing. So we just have to make this square brackets. Okay, square brackets. Now this turned it into an array. Now we can store multiple ground into this array. Okay, and over here we get an error. We get an error. It says cannot convert. Basically what we have to do, in after this ground prefab we have to make these square brackets, and in square brackets if we pass 0 right over here, 0 will be the first ground, and if you pass 1 right over here, 1 basically the second ground. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, we're gonna pass 0, 0 basically referencing the first round. Okay, so control S on your keyboard, and now let's move to Unity. So in ground spawner script we're gonna see an empty list that gonna say ground prefab. Okay, so what we need to drag all of this ground into that array. Basically we need to store that, and we will choose a random one, then we can gonna spawn that. Okay, so I'm gonna go to ground spawner script. Okay, and as you can see ground prefab, and it says list is empty. Basically this array is totally empty. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna select the first ground, let's drag it out there, and also select the second ground, let's drag it out there. Okay, now we drag it both of this ground one. So basically this ground is the first, basically this right over here is the first ground, and 0 is the first ground, 1 is the second ground. As you can see, basically it's just basically it's assigned with some certain index. So 0 is the first one, 1 is the second one, and if we move to script, as you can see we pass 0. So 0 right over here basically referencing this first ground. So basically we in the next time we just spawning the first ground. All the time we spawning the first ground. Okay, let me hit this play button and see the results. So let's hit this play button in the top, and we would able to see that first ground will be spawned next to each other. Okay, and it will always gonna spawn. As you can see, the second ground is not spawning at all. Okay, So I'm gonna unplay this now. Basically, we have to choose a random one. We don't want to spawn a specific ground. We want to choose a random one. It can be ground 2, it can be ground 1. We will choose a random one, then we're gonna spawn it. Okay, so let's go to script. Before we spawn, what we're gonna do, we will use this random, okay, random dot range function. This function right over here will take, so we're gonna start from 0, the first minimum inclusive, as you can see, and float maximum inclusive. So we're gonna pass right over here ground prefab dot length and close that up with semicolon. Okay, so this random dot range function over here will pick up a random number between 0 and ground prefab dot length. So ground prefab dot length right over here means how many ground we have. So if we move to unity, as you can see, we have two grounds, ground 0 and ground 1, basically ground 1 and ground 2. So we have two ground, okay, two ground. So right over here ground prefab dot length basically will be 2. So this random dot range function right over here will pick up a number between 0 and 2. So it can be 0 and 1, but it will not include 2. It will definitely gonna include 0 and 1. It, so this random dot range function gonna pick up between 0 and 2, but it will not pick up 2. It can be 0 and 1. So whatever we random dot range function picks up, what we want to do, we want to store it into another variable, whatever random dot range function gonna give us. Okay, so let's store that. So let's create a int variable. Okay, let's call it random prefab. Okay, random ground prefab, or you can say random prefab. Let's set equal to this. So this random prefab can be 0 1 depending upon what random dot range function picks up. Okay, but it can be random, it will include 0 and 1. So as you can see 0, if let's suppose that random dot range function picks up 0. So 0, as you can see, the first ground, and 1 as index is the second ground. Okay, so but this one can picks up a random number. It can be 0 and 1. Okay, so that's why this random prefab right over here, it can be 0 and 1. Okay, so instead of passing right over here 0, we're gonna pass random prefab, and we do know that this random prefab can be 0 and 1. Let's suppose this random prefab 1. Okay, so as you can see, 1 is the second ground and 0 is the first ground, but we do know that this function gonna picks up random number. So this random prefab can be 0 and 1. So this random, we pass random prefab which can be 0 and 1. If it's 0, it will spawn the first ground. If it's 1, then it will spawn the second ground. Okay, so Control S on your keyboard to save your code. And now let's move to Unity. We're gonna able to see both of this ground will be spawned. Okay, but it can be random. Okay, so let's hit this play button in the top, and we should able to see that that ground 2 also gonna spawn from right over here. And in ground 2 we just added a character, you can say enemy. As you can see, we just have to pass besides that. So we need to adjust the collider, as you can see. Okay, we need to adjust the collider in ground 2, ground 2 game object. Okay, basically the enemy. So let's open up by double clicking that ground 2. Okay, so I'm gonna select this character and F2 focus on that. Okay, and what I want to adjust this box collider. So let's select this character and click on edit collider and right over here, and let's drag this up something like right, let's take a little bit down. Okay, to basically match that up. So I'm gonna drag it a little bit up, so I guess it's fine. And let's do right over here, just play around with the box collider and you gonna get hang of it. Okay, and I hope you get the idea, and you can create multiple ground as you wish. Okay, so I'm gonna duplicate one more time. Okay, So let's select this ground one, or this the first ground. Select that from assets, okay, not in hierarchy. Don't do this, okay, or it will be a little bit messy. So that's why, don't do it right over here. Instead, go to prefab. You have to make it that ground firstly prefab. Basically, you need to select that ground and drag it to assets, so it will turn it to blue. Basically means copy, or you can say prefab, and select that prefab and control D to duplicate. Okay, so I'm gonna name this ground one. You can say I'm gonna name is this ground to ground 3. Okay, we have ground 1, ground 2, and now this one will be ground 3. You can and create as many ground as you wish. So I'm gonna name this to ground 3. Okay, ground 3, and what I want right over here, uh, right over here, I want to change the color of this ground. Okay, something like, if I let's select and material for this ground 3. So to change the color of anything like that, we need to move over to assets. Okay, right click, then create a folder. Firstly, call it something like material, and now let's go to that material folder, right click, create, and you need to create a material. So you can see it right over here. Let's call this material to ground 3 material. Okay, ground 3 material, and I want to change the color. Okay, so I'm gonna select this ground material, ground 3 material, and drag it to this game object. Okay, basically the you can drag it right over here, or what else you can do, you can select this ground 3, go over to mesh renderer, and it will be null or something else. So what you have to do, you need to select this ground 3 material, and you can have to drag right over here in this slot. Okay, and you can change the color. So select this material, and you can change any color you wish. Something like, I'm gonna choose yellow. Okay, yellow or red, it's totally up to you what color you want to choose. So I'm gonna select this one. This one is seems okay, so I'm gonna go back to scene view, and let's select this ground spawner script. So we have 3 grounds now. We have ground 1, ground 2, and ground 3. So in the list, what we have to do, we need to drag the ground 3. So I'm going to select this ground 3 and drag it to ground prefab array. Okay, or the list. Now 0 is the first ground, 1 is the second ground, and say index of 2 is the third ground. So this right over here, ground prefab dot length now gonna be 3. Okay, because as you can see in the list or in the array, we have 3 grounds, 1, 2, 3. So this ground prefab dot length right over here will be 3. So this random dot range function now gonna pick up between 0 and 3. It will not include 3, but it will include 2. Okay, so this random dot range function is gonna pick up 0, 1, and 2. So if it, let's suppose this one right over here picks up 2, 2 as you can see is the third ground. Okay, so I hope you get the idea. Now if we hit this play button, we should able to see all of the ground prefab will be now gonna spawn. Okay, will spawn all of the prefab. Okay, so as you can see, it's spawned, and if we just pass through it, we should able to see one more time. Okay, I don't know, it's not picking up. Okay, so it picks up right, as you can see it's pick up, but it's overlapping. Okay, I don't know why it's overlapping. It shouldn't, basically. To fix that, I'm gonna select this ground one. Okay, we have next post right over here, and if I go to ground one, next post has over here. Okay, so okay, so what I'm gonna do now, instead of as you can see, 0 is the first child. Okay, 0 is the first child. So so you can leave it. In the next video we're gonna talk about it. Okay, now it's fine. As you seen, it's spawning all of the grounds, ground 3, ground 1, and the list just goes on. Okay, so you can choose a different color obstacle as you wish, and I hope you get the idea of it, how you can spawn random ground. It's totally up to you. Okay, obstacle, and the list just goes on. You can select some square, you can say some black square, white square you need to avoid instead of the character I have used. Okay, so what I want to replace that character, or I'm gonna leave that character, or gonna replace that with some square. Okay, you can do that as well. So I'm gonna go to ground 2. Okay, ground 2, and I want to delete this character. Instead, what I want to create a game object to this ground. Okay, and for this material, so I'm gonna go to this ground 3 material you can say, and I'm gonna choose the color. So click on this color field, and I'm gonna choose the same color. Sorry, uh, not. So I'm gonna choose the same color. Oh, sorry, I done Control Alt Z to. Oh, sorry, Control. Okay, Control Z for undo the thing, whatever you have done. If you have done a mistake, Control Z, so it will go back to where you started. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select this material and gonna change the color. So go to the video and let's choose the same color right over here. Okay, so it's fine. So what I want in ground 2, I'm gonna create a some square you can say. So let's create, right click. Okay, so double click that to open that up prefab. Okay, and I'm gonna change the color of this material. Let's leave it for now. In ground 2, I'm gonna choose, so right click, 3D object. Okay, 3D object cube, and I'm gonna drag this cube right over here. Okay, and let's increase the size of this cube some around in the x2, sorry, not 2, in the x1. It's pretty big, I guess. So what I want, so zero point 0.5 in the x. So you can just play around and you're gonna get hang of it. Instead of the character, you can choose those black squares, it's black cube, anything you want. Okay,